So Francisca will be sharing the slide on my behalf, right?
Yes.
Or can we both share? Is it possible?
Yeah, we can both share, but I think the last person that shares would be like the screen that other people eventually see. So no worries about that. And you are just after me, so I can just say that I'll leave the floor to you, and then as you start talking, I will just change slides for you.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, folks, we've just got a couple of minutes, so I'm gonna turn off my video and go to mute. Audra, just kind of watch the time and tell us when you're ready to get started. That way Roger can hit the record button for us and we capture that very beginning. So,
and maybe I'll go ahead and share the slides as Hori had suggested. That way the title slide.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Does that look okay?
It does.
Great.
It looks good. I failed to say this, but thank you all of you for doing this webinar. I really appreciate it. And I know on behalf of all the colleagues in the consortium that everyone really appreciates it. So thanks for taking the time and effort to do this.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to our November 17th webinar. I think we're just after 10 o'clock in the morning here, my time in North Carolina on the East Coast of the United States. So if it's okay with everybody, we will go ahead and get started. So my name is Audra Wormald. I'm an assistant professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I will be moderating today's session, filling in for Steve Sanka today. He tested positive for COVID and is not feeling well. So again, welcome to our webinar session hosted by the Consortium for Innovation in Post-Harvest Loss and Food Waste Reduction. A couple of quick reminders before we get started today. The Consortium for Innovation in Post-Harvest Loss and Food Waste Reduction was created as a partnership between several universities and research institutions across the globe with a mission to improve livelihoods, preserve nutrients, and realize an efficient food system. And so the consortium builds academic and entrepreneurial capacity by engaging researchers and students in multinational, multidisciplinary teams with experts and entrepreneurs from both the private and public sectors. And also before starting, I would like to acknowledge our funding organizations, the Rockefeller Foundation and the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, FFAR. So our topic today, we are going to be taking a look at an entrepreneurial program that was designed to facilitate bottom-up experimentation and local innovation, which are critical for creating sustainable solutions by domestic small and medium-scale enterprises. Our panelists today will share perspectives based on the Sugako AgriFood Entrepreneurship Initiative that took place in Tanzania. And so we are excited to have with us here today Francesca Bacco at VU University Amsterdam, Andrea Koali at Bocconi University, Haji Msangi at Bocconi University of Agriculture in Tanzania, and myself at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So we will plan to have a Q&A session after each individual presents. So if you have a question for a presenter, please submit it either through the Q&A function or the chat box at any time during the presentation. And let me also remind you that this webinar is being recorded, and the recorded video will be uploaded onto the consortium website within the next 48 hours. And so with that, we have wrapped up our housekeeping business here and can move into the actual content of the webinar. And you will continue to hear from me first. So to start, I want to quickly motivate why we care about entrepreneurship. We know from the academic literature that entrepreneurship is a major driver of economic development and poverty alleviation through its positive impact on job creation and innovation. It's important to foster entrepreneurship in agricultural and food-related sectors, particularly in developing economies where supply chains, more effective supply chains are needed. However, entrepreneurship is both risky and uncertain, and entrepreneurs face a number of challenges that might be even more magnified in the context of developing economies where different types of institutions and infrastructure can't always be taken as given. So with this in mind, we created the Sugako AgriFood Entrepreneurship Training Initiative to provide entrepreneurs in the agribusiness sector with valuable skills to develop their business ideas and improve their performance by training them to think more systematically. So this initiative was created through a partnership between 3 institutions, Sugako in Tanzania, Bocconi in Italy, and the University of Maryland in the United States. And so this involved 12 professors, researchers, and graduate students across these 3 institutions, 8 specially trained instructors who were supported by 16 research assistants and resulted in 151 trained entrepreneurs. This training we thought would be useful both for entrepreneurs who are in the early stages of developing their ideas or just starting up their businesses, as well as for more developed companies that might be thinking about undertaking some different strategic changes. And we think it's useful for both types because both businesses need to make decisions under uncertainty, and they both need to understand whether the different courses of actions they have in mind that they might want to pursue, whether or not these will work. And so the idea is that the entrepreneurship training program helps provide a structured framework for them to think through their different ideas and help them learn in the face of uncertainty. So we offered a free of charge entrepreneurship training program and embedded it into a randomized controlled trial, an RCT, where we offered 2 different versions of the training program via a 6 in-person class setup. So these classes took place over a 3-month time span, and we randomly assigned entrepreneurs into either one of these 2 different training groups. And we also had a control group in which participants did not receive any training. In the action-based training group, this group, the training emphasized actionability, focusing on getting entrepreneurs to experiment and validate their ideas in a very quick fashion, whereas the theory-based training group put a lot more emphasis on thinking and reflection. And the idea here is that entrepreneurs would experiment and then validate their ideas after they've put a careful thinking process into play. Despite these differences, the goal remained the same across both groups. The training programs in both, the goal is to make entrepreneurs better decision makers. So the flow and topics were equal across the two different training programs. It consisted of 6 4-hour sections that took place every other week over 3 months. And these sessions were designed to be highly interactive and cover topics that would be practical and relevant to entrepreneurs related to identifying and designing the business model of the firm, identifying and segmenting different types of customers, conducting interviews and surveys to learn more about their potential customers, potential solutions, and designing these small experiments to test and validate assumptions related to the business model and the business value proposition and solution offered. So there were about 15 to 20 entrepreneurs per class. The same instructor would teach both types of training programs, and these classes were highly interactive. So let me tell you just a little bit more about each of the two different types of training programs. Under the action-based approach, these entrepreneurs, were taught to validate everything through a 4-step process. So the first step for these entrepreneurs were to document their quote-unquote plan A. We had them fill out a business model canvas. They would then create hypotheses based on the different elements of their business model canvas, evaluate these hypotheses by systematically testing different parts of it, and then start to make a decision about whether it makes sense to continue pursuing their ideas as is. Maybe they need to go back and refine some different pieces of the business model canvas, or whether they should stop pursuing the idea entirely. With the theory-based approach, participants were trained to think more scientifically through this 5-step approach. And here, the first step, we had entrepreneurs create a story about their businesses. And so in this way, they were developing a theory of their own firm. And then they would create hypotheses based on this story, and then test these hypotheses and evaluate them, again, to then make the decision about whether to continue pursuing the idea, pivot, or exit. So while both trainings were identical in terms of the number of classes, the basic structure of the program, the different examples used in the sessions, and the topics covered, the key differences here with the action-based approach, emphasis was really on these experimental elements. And the key piece here was getting entrepreneurs to validate their ideas quickly based on real customer feedback, versus the theory-based group put an emphasis on developing their theory of the firm in addition to these experimental elements, and really take the time to develop these theories about their business ideas before moving into the hypothesis development and experimentation. So that's a quick overview of our training program. And now I'm going to turn it over to Francesca to talk to us about some of the characteristics of the entrepreneurs that participated.
Thanks very much, Audra. So just let me share my screen. Okay, so I believe you should be seeing my slides full screen now. Okay. So as Audra said, I'm Francesca Bacco. I'm an assistant professor of entrepreneurship at the VU in Amsterdam. So I will be providing some information and some overview about the characteristics of participants in our entrepreneurship training program. So just to start with the general overview, we had 202 agri-food entrepreneurs in Tanzania. All the entrepreneurs that were included in our program were operating across the agriculture value chain, in different parts of the value chain, and I will provide more information about that in a minute. So we had 151 entrepreneurs that we admitted into the training, so that we're effectively trained. And these entrepreneurs were coming from 3 pilot regions that were our initial target. So these regions were the region of Morogoro, the region of Dar es Salaam, and Pwani. So these will be, so Morogoro and Pwani are more rural than Dar es Salaam. Dar es Salaam is the biggest region in this case. And these entrepreneurs were split into 2 treatment groups, as Audra said. So part of these entrepreneurs received training according to the action-based approach, and part of these entrepreneurs received training according to the theory-based approach. We also had a smaller group of entrepreneurs that we consider to be a qualitative control. So these entrepreneurs were so this control group is non-random, so it's not like a purely randomized control group. It only includes 51 entrepreneurs, and these entrepreneurs come from 20 regions, and these entrepreneurs were not admitted into the training program, so they did not receive any training. But we thought it was interesting to keep tracking their progress nonetheless over time, and to use them as sort of a benchmark for the effectiveness of what we did, even though our interest was mostly in comparing the entrepreneurs that received the training according to the 2 different approaches. So in terms of who these entrepreneurs then are, what were the characteristics of the participants in our RCT? These are just some numerical data that can give you a bit of the big picture about who we collected data from. So as we can see, we collected data mostly from company founders. So the respondents to our interviews and our surveys tended to be people that own the company, or at least were part of the founding team. These founders are predominantly highly educated males with 30 plus years of age, which is not surprising, but this is the sample that we had. Of course, we also had some female entrepreneurs, but the majority of them were males. Most founders do not have a business degree, but they tend to be highly educated, and they tend to have attended at least 1 business course or training program before our entrepreneurship training initiative. So in terms of the businesses that these entrepreneurs had, I just want to provide you with a quick overview of the type of businesses that we're talking about, and then I will be providing some more qualitative examples of these businesses. So again, we had mostly for-profit businesses, although very few were registered. So most of these businesses were operating informally. As Audra mentioned, we included both startups as well as established companies. So in our case, we had 130 startups and 72 established companies, and these shares tended to be pretty much the same across the 2 treatment groups. So we, of course, checked whether these shares were balanced before starting with our intervention, and we found that there was a good balance between the 2 different groups. As I said, these are mostly for-profit businesses. Each business had about 7 members of their team, of which 2 or 3 members were tended to be co-founders on average. As I said earlier, a lot of these businesses were not registered, so we have a high number of businesses that operate informally in the informal economy, and most businesses offered either a product or a combination of product and services. We had a lower number of businesses that offered just services, as low as 6% of our sample across the 2 treatment groups. So I also wanted to provide you with an overview of the development stage of this entrepreneurial project to give you some more data about which kind of businesses we're talking about and where they were in terms of their stage of development. So to do that, we employed a group of research assistants who did interviews with these entrepreneurs at different points in time. And in this case, we're talking about the interviews that were done at the baseline, so meaning before we started the intervention. So we asked these research assistants to code the stage of development of the business idea according to these 5 categories that they had. So this is based on the interpretation of the research assistants based on the responses of the entrepreneurs. So these stages were either analysis of the problem, meaning these entrepreneurs were still thinking about what exactly they wanted to do. The second stage was prototype, meaning they had some sort of prototype of their final solution, but they were not on the market yet, so they were still somehow testing with this prototype. Then we have prototype with client, meaning they had a solution, they already had some clients, but the solution was still under development, and they were not sure whether this would allow them to then make revenue with these clients. Then we have pre-sale, meaning the solution was pretty developed, but they were still in the process of understanding whether this would be profitable. And then we have sales. So not surprisingly, in this case, we have most businesses in the sales stage, meaning that even if they were startups, most businesses were still were already making some sort of revenue. But we also have some businesses, almost 20%, that were in the analysis stage, meaning they had not started developing whatever they wanted to do. And we have fewer businesses in the either prototype with client, or pre-sale stage. So this is the picture at the baseline before the entrepreneurs entered our program. Then in terms of an overview of where these entrepreneurs were operating in the agri-food sector. So as we can see from this graph, most entrepreneurs were operating in farm production, okay? So this means, producing different type of crops. Some entrepreneurs were also operating in the processing, marketing, and logistics sectors within agri-food. So I wanted to provide you with some qualitative examples of some of the business ideas that we had in our program. And again, this is based on the data that we collected from research assistants who interviewed these entrepreneurs directly. So for example, here we have an example of a milk producing business. So in this case, the research assistants described this idea as the idea is to produce and sell milk and other products such as soya for the purpose of health, to improve those who suffer from malnutrition. They buy those raw materials from farmers. So this is an example of a business that was already quite developed. So they had an idea about what they wanted to do, and probably they also have some clients when they started the program with us. Then we have this example of an idea that had not started operation yet. So something that was just about to start, or an entrepreneur that wanted to learn how she could best develop their business. So in this case, the research assistant described it as this venture is an agribusiness application firm that has not started operation. They link farmers and their farm products market all over the country. And the firm aims to reduce the post-harvest loss by ensuring reliable market for the farm produces. The firm is still facing different challenges, including access to capital, access to the right team, and how pricing would be done for their products. We then have another example of a firm that had an idea and were seeking guidance about how to best develop this idea. So in this case, the entrepreneur had an idea of farming green beans. And she started with this idea by getting an advice from her friend who was farming it in Arusha, different regions, so not one of our main target region, and to run it in a small scale since she has a small plot of land. And at the time, she was thinking her customers would be mostly retailers. And then lastly, we have an example of an entrepreneur that wanted to introduce some form of technological innovation to her business. So in this case, this entrepreneur would like to add value on production of mangoes by using drying technology for durability. So as you can see, these are mostly, of course, they're all businesses in the agri-food sector. They're mostly related to production, but also the business ideas the content of the business ideas was quite different across all these different entrepreneurs. And I wanted to finish this overview by providing you with an overview of the goals, so the motivations why these entrepreneurs decided to join the program in the first place. So overall, most entrepreneurs applied to the initiative hoping to increase production as well as to gain new knowledge and ultimately achieve business growth. We noticed that there were some differences across the different regions. So for example, while for entrepreneurs in Dar es Salaam, which is the most, let's say, developed region between the three regions that we consider. So for these entrepreneurs, knowledge and growth appear to be more important, whereas production appeared to be more important for entrepreneurs located in Morogoro and Pwani, which again are the two most rural regions from the three regions that we considered. So this concludes my overview of our training participants. I hope, or in general about the entrepreneurs who participated in the initiative. I hope this was a valuable overview that will help us set the stage for the insights that we will see later on. And I will now leave the stage to my colleague Hashim Zanji, who's gonna provide some more insights about the challenges that these entrepreneurs faced and the thing that were most difficult for them and the reason that motivated them to be part of our training initiative.
Thank you. I'm Hajim Sangi, PhD candidate in agricultural economics at Sokoine University of Agriculture, Tanzania. So in this part, I will take you through the, Andre and I will take you through the entrepreneurs' perceptions about challenges and opportunities. So I will take part in the general observations as noted from the field in the course of our training, monthly event series, and during data collections. So we noted a number of observations as far as their business is concerned. One of which is related to technology, in which we observed that most entrepreneurs recognize the importance of the growing importance of information technology in the contemporary business environment, as it increases their business performance and competitiveness. But also we have noted a number of complaints about the use of IT technology, where most entrepreneurs complained that internet services generally are poor, but also despite of being poor, they are also expensive. So that is perceived as a cost element in their business, and it seemed to reduce their business competitiveness. But also we noted that there is a serious limited access to modern business operation tools. For example, one of the frequently noted challenge is that most entrepreneurs tend to keep their business records on papers rather than using computers. So this makes it difficult to analyze their records and get some information to make their business decisions. And as a result, it also impact their business efficiency and competitiveness. But also, we noted that majority of entrepreneurs have access to mobile phones and particularly smartphones. But of course, most of them are not aware of important mobile application or utilities that can be used to enhance their business performance. For example, the Microsoft Excel and other Microsoft softwares in the mobile phones that can be used for record keeping, for instance, but also other productivity tools like the effective use of calendars for recording different events in their production. So these are among the challenges as far as technology is concerned. Also, another observation is related to access to finance, of which most entrepreneurs perceive that access to finance is among the most important challenge as far as their business development and performance is concerned. And this is perceived to be even more challenging when it comes to startup financing. And this has resulted into most entrepreneurs opting for occupational diversification as a strategy to, to raise funds for their business through increasing their eligibility to credit access using their employment as collateral, but also generating some savings from their salaries. So as I mean, in this program, we have noted that most of entrepreneurs, apart from being agri-food entrepreneurs, they are also former employees, either in public or government sectors. And one of the reasons being that the motive behind being that they didn't have enough money to run their business or implement their ideas, and therefore opted for looking for alternative employment opportunities where they can generate some savings and also use their employment to get the loan from different financial services. But as far as our training program is concerned, initially, as we noted, most entrepreneurs believed that their business ideas were great, but the only challenge was access to finance to implement their business ideas. But at some point along the training program, we realized that most entrepreneurs changed the way they think about that perspective. So most of them realized that in addition to financial constraints, there is also a challenge of effectively evaluating their business ideas before they put or they commit their scarce resources into that ideas. So they also realized that there's a challenge of, the lack of, there's a limited ability to evaluate their business ideas. Okay, so another observation was related to market, where we have noted that entrepreneurs are going through different market access struggles, and most of them seem to be less aware of what their market is. They have less clue about the kind of the market for which they produce their product. And we have noted that most of them tend to produce whatever they produce and then start looking for market. And we describe this as, trying to bend this demand to meet supply instead of trying to structure your supply to meet the market demand. So this has had serious implications to them, as most of the product being produced were perishable, and at the end of the day, they tend to either sell them at lower prices to avoid them from decaying, or selling, or sometimes getting lost from the decay of the product. So we have noted that only a few entrepreneurs were having prior arrangements before production. So this was among the serious challenging, one of the serious constraints that was perceived by most entrepreneurs. But also, as far as the training program is concerned, we have noted that the entrepreneurs have realized that focus on the market is real important before committing their funds into ideas that might not be viable. So as we have trained them on the scientific approach to evaluate their business ideas, they have realized that it's important to focus on what markets demand before implementing the ideas to avoid unnecessary losses from their scarce resources. Okay, so another observation is also related to market, but more specifically, export markets. Our participants seem to be aware that export markets can offer lucrative prices for their products, but the only challenge is accessibility, where most of them perceive that it's difficult and probably impossible to access export markets. And one of the noted challenge was the multiple stringent requirements for export markets in terms of standards, volume, and reliability of supplies, which has higher compliance cost. But also, in addition to the multiple requirements, there is also noted challenge of bureaucratic processes of acquiring permits and export certificates in the government and the regulatory bodies. So this also contributed to higher compliance cost. And we had one of the example of our participants who got the markets for strawberry, and she decided to start strawberry production while making follow-up on the export permits and certificates, so that at the end of the day, she could export her strawberries to Belgium. But as the strawberry were in the farm and she was making follow-up on the export, on the paperwork to access the export market, she ended up, she couldn't make it to complete the bureaucratic processes of acquiring these export permits and certificates. And then they, by the time the strawberry were ready for harvesting, the certificate, the process of acquiring the certificates were not yet complete. So she ended up selling the strawberry at the domestic markets at lower prices, of course, to different supermarkets and processing units in order to avoid from, to avoid a complete loss that could result from decaying. So as you can see, this is one of the challenge that is perceived as important as far as their business is concerned. And another challenge, another issue that was also observed is related to trust. So in our course of interaction with participants during the training, monthly event series and data collection, we have noted two issues related to trust that probably need special attentions as far as getting important information about entrepreneurs is concerned, probably for researchers and other stakeholders. So we noted that most entrepreneurs tend to, hesitate to provide their business information about their business ideas. And one of the reasons being that their ideas could be stolen and probably implemented before they get the money to implement their ideas. So we have one example of some entrepreneurs who tried to change their ideas from the original one that were registered at the start of the program. And we tried to ask them the reason for doing that. Of course, all of them say that they are afraid that their idea may be copied by other people and probably implemented before they put it into action. So another issue was also related to concealment of information about their revenues and earnings. And one of the main reasons being that entrepreneurs are afraid of being probably overtaxed or fined by the government, especially from the tax revenue authorities. As Francisca just presented, that most of them are operating the business that are registered. So despite that, they were, they were not registered, and they were getting, despite the fact that they are doing business, but they are not registered, and the fact that they were getting revenue, so they are supposed to, of course, to pay tax, but some of them, maybe for some different reasons, they are not doing that. And so they are so much afraid of providing this information because there could be people who are from the tax departments who are looking for these people who are qualified for paying tax and they are not paying, and they could be probably fined or compelled to pay the tax. So the implication we draw from this kind of observation is that for potential for stakeholders like researchers or any other people who might need this kind of important but sensitive information from entrepreneurs, should probably try as much as they can to establish trust, to communicate the confidentiality statements so that they can get, they may end up getting the right information. Otherwise, if this is not well taken care of, they may end up getting probably not information. So this marks the end of this part, and I would like to welcome Andrea to continue for this more or less similar part, but as informed by the analysis from the data we collected.
Thank you, Ashi. So let me just share the screen.
And as Andrea is getting his slides up, let me just pause for a second and see if anybody has any burning questions at this point. I see Dixon has added a question to the Q&A. That's a really interesting question, and if it's all right with everyone, we'll tackle that at the end of Andrea's presentation. But anybody else want to jump in with a question at this point? Otherwise, I will turn it over to you, Andrea.
Okay, thank you very much, Rodra. Okay, so hope everyone can hear me and see the slide deck. So my name is Andrea Coali. I'm a PhD candidate at Bocconi University. So I'm going to describe a bit, building on what Ashi just described. I'm going to tell you some insights and some findings that we have from our data that we collected throughout the program. So let me start by saying that we collected data over time. So we are actually covering almost 1 year of data collection with 6 data points, including the data points, the data collection before the intervention started. And we actually collected data through 2 different instruments, so questionnaires and interviews that were actually managed by Haji and the local team, and an amazing group of research assistants that actually without them, it would haven't been possible to run this compelling data collection. And among all the variables that actually we collected, today I'm going to talk about variables related on entrepreneurs' perception of challenges to business development. So to complement with some larger scale evidence, all the examples that Haji just presented. And also, we collected data on entrepreneurs' perceived ability to deal with potentially challenging factors in both in the environment and both factors related to their specific business proposition. So the research we're currently doing is basically related on potential shifts, so the impact on perceptions and perceived ability due to the effect of the training of the 2 interventions. And also on business outcomes. So let me start with the question on the challenges to entrepreneurship. So very briefly, we had 2 questions here. So one is a survey-based question, one is an interview-based question. I'm going to show you some results from both these data sources. And basically, I will start with the survey one. So entrepreneurs were asked basically to select the top 3 challenges to the development of their business idea in each of the 6 data points I described. And we actually showed entrepreneurs only 9 challenges, and I will explain the rationale why only 9 in a second. And here in the graph that you can see, you see basically the baseline data. So you have the share of entrepreneurs that are mentioning these factors as challenging. Of course, since entrepreneurs could mention 3 challenges, I had to mention 3 challenges, the percentages do not sum to 100, of course. And you can see that out of our 202 people that applied to the program, financial capital, so accessing financial capital is deemed to be the most important challenge for this sample of entrepreneurs. So very much in line with the anecdotal evidence that Aji told us before. And this is followed actually by problems in accessing reliable inputs. And also other, let's say, traits of the environment like infrastructure or government regulation are deemed to be, quite important as sources of challenge to the development of the business ideas. Then you have some other challenges, some other factors that we call, project specific. So factors that are more specific to the intrinsic and idiosyncratic business proposition that the entrepreneurs are developing. So for example, learning how to develop a strategy, or being able to identify the right market where to enter, or knowing customers and competitors. You can see actually how the latter 2, so knowing customer and competitors, are not seen as very much challenging factors at the baseline by these entrepreneurs. But as Ajay said, after the training, some entrepreneurs actually shifted their focus, even if not much over time. And some other project-related factors like identifying the market and developing the strategy, a reliable and compelling strategy for developing the business idea, are actually ranked as the third and fourth more important sources of challenges. So we have these 9 challenges only here because, of course, we had limited space in the survey, and we wanted actually to just let's say, entrepreneurs focus on what are deemed the most important challenges in this setting. And actually, we chose them according to other empirical evidence, like the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, and also discussing them with the local Tanzanian partners. So I'm showing here the baseline data because there were no major shifts, let's say, on an aggregate level period by period. So in general, these entrepreneurs, regardless of the training they went through, or if they went through no training in the control group, they tend to, let's say, state that environment-related factors like financial capital, accessing inputs, or the infrastructure-related problems are the most challenging factors. However, we were interested also in understanding whether these 9 categories were actually, these 9 factors were the most compelling ones, and also to understand if these entrepreneurs perceive other factors as challenging. So we complement this data with an open question that arrays asked in the phone interviews. Actually, here we asked entrepreneurs to state their goals, up to 3 goals they had, and then up to 3 potential challenging factors that they were actually facing in trying to reach these goals. So differently from the survey-based question, here we are not constraining entrepreneurs to choose, challenges from a list, and also they could mention even 1 or 2 factors and not necessarily 3 of them. And then after we collected this data, Array described this for us, and then we coded this ex post. And as you can see, data is pretty coherent, at least the ranking and also the categories, with what actually we find from the survey. So we have that the most important challenging factor for these entrepreneurs is still accessing financial capital. The second highest rank is still accessing inputs. And then we have this knowledge factor. So it seems actually that many entrepreneurs have, feel actually, let's say, some limitations in their business skills, strategy skills. So they actually want to increase their skill set and knowledge set with respect, to develop their business idea. And you can see actually that there are other challenges, like, for example, climate change and diseases that are actually common, in the agri-food sector, because we're not talking about, general diseases for the human being, but mostly, farm-related diseases, for crops or animals. And we also have some, a share of entrepreneurs that actually mention issues related to the team, for example, like the trust issues that Haji mentioned as one of the most relevant challenges, at least anecdotally. And those are some challenges related, to price fluctuation, and those are some that we actually label as, project specific, like, developing the strategy or identify the market, or also issues related to more, let's say, managerial practices, related to the internal production of the goods and the services. Also here, over time, we don't see many shifts. So people tend to consider, let's say, these environment-related challenges, again, like accessing capital. So these challenges that stem from the environmental conditions in Tanzania to be the most important source of challenges to business development. So this is for what actually concerns the perception of what is more or less challenging by these entrepreneurs. And then we asked, as anticipated, we asked actually how much people believe, how much these entrepreneurs felt themselves to be able. So what was their perceived ability to deal with challenges that actually could stem from these different factors. So this is actually a 1 to 7 score for each of the 9 challenges that I showed you before. So, accessing financial capital, accessing inputs, or for instance, knowing customers and competitors, we asked the entrepreneurs in the survey to rank themselves on a scale from 1 to 7, where 1 means, I'm not actually able to deal with potential challenges from this factor. 7 is actually, I feel pretty confident I can actually deal with challenges stemming from this particular aspect. And we recorded this over time. So we have these 6 data points. And our interest actually was in understanding if the theory-based training increased these perceptions more than the action-based training. So of course, this was an experiment. We had some expectations on the results, on some of the results. And what we find actually, and you can see in this graph, the observation period from 0 to 5. 0 is the pre-training, 5 is the last one that we observed, so for a total of 6 data points. And on the y-axis, we have this average perception score that averages all these 1 to 7 scores for all these 9 challenges. So we obtain, again, an aggregate measure of perceived ability. And actually, what you can see, the blue line, the blue, let's say, solid line, is referred to the average score, perceived score in the theory-based training, while the orange one is the score in the action-based training. And what we find, and we corroborate this, of course, with econometric models, we find a significant and stable increase for the theory-based group only. So basically, the takeaway here is that the theory-based entrepreneurs actually become more confident in their ability to deal with potential challenges to business development overall. And why is that? We believe this is because of the moralistic, let's say, reasoning that the theory-based training provides them. So remember, as Audra was saying at the beginning, that the theory-based training is actually teaching entrepreneurs to, of course, validate their ideas on the market with experimentation, so on and so forth, but is actually pushing them to do so in a sort of theory-driven way. So they have to create this compelling theory or story of their firms or of their products, why they should be successful, what should be potential contingencies, what are the key assumptions, and how they are connected to each other. So our interpretation is that this training is making these people more aware of what should be done, more aware on how to interpret data, and evidence coming from the experiments, and actually this increases the perceived ability they have with respect, to dealing with potential challenges. So, and what we find actually is that this effect is mostly driven by an increase in the perceived ability to deal with challenges stemming from project-related factors. So if we actually zoom into this smaller category of potential challenges, so those actually stemming, for example, from difficulties in knowing the customers, knowing competitors, identify the market where to enter, or develop a strategy, we find that this increase, that this increase is more marked and it's more stable over time. For the environment-related challenges, so those actually over which the entrepreneur has little control, because if there is a problem in the access to internet or access to electricity, the entrepreneur cannot do much to change the infrastructure at the state or regional level, whereas an entrepreneur can do a lot in trying to know better her customers, in trying to really develop a compelling strategy, so on and so forth. And we find actually that this increase in the perceived ability is mostly driven by an increase in the perceived ability to deal with these project-specific challenges. We also find an increase with duration with the environment-related challenges, but it's less stable over time. Whereas, this one, it seems to be very much persistent. I also invite you to see this increase. The increase actually happens immediately. So period 1 and 2 means actually period 1, we collected data while the training was ongoing. So it's exactly at the middle of the training. The training were 6 sessions, and we collected this intermediate data point after 3 lectures. And the second data point is exactly at the end of the training program. So we see, this coherent increase during the program and right after the end of the program, which is actually persistent. Whereas, we find this milder increase for the action-based, but then it decays over time, which is not the case instead for the theory-based group. So supporting our idea that, this more holistic, more compelling decision-making structured approach actually makes these entrepreneurs more confident operators. So what are the two key takeaways? So we started with the perception of challenges, and I've shown you how there were no significant shifts or focus before after the training, no significant differences actually between experimental conditions, but we saw together with the first graphs how the primary concern for these entrepreneurs are challenges that actually stem from the environment. So accessing finance, accessing reliable inputs, government regulations. So these are the main barriers actually that people, at least our sample, of entrepreneurs in the Tanzanian agri-food sector deem to be, the primary concern for their business development. And actually, this is quite, in contrast with what we expected. We were expecting a shift, as Haji mentioned. Some entrepreneurs actually shifted their focus towards, trying to develop, and a better idea, that was given for granted. So they might feel more challenging, to develop a compelling strategy. We see some shift, but on the aggregate level, on the average level, still environment-related challenges are deemed to be the biggest concern for these entrepreneurs. Then in terms of perceived ability, what we have seen with the last two graphs with the time trend is that entrepreneurs generally, again, it's a 1 to 7 score. And the average scores we see, is around 5 for the project-specific challenges and around 4 for the environment-related ones. So meaning that entrepreneurs coherently perceive themselves as better able to deal with challenges over which they have control, rather than challenges over which they do not have control. But we find, that there is a significant increase for their theory-based entrepreneurs. So they, over time, and especially, during and after the training and persistently, over the data collection period, they perceive themselves as better able to deal with challenges, both types, but specifically the project-specific ones. So the takeaway is that a more realistic training based on theory, reasoning, and experimentation, of course, leads to an increased perceived entrepreneurial ability. Of course, there might be a question that could arise now. It is, okay, you told me that the theory-based reasoning is making these people perceiving themselves as better able. So what is the final outcome? What is the final outcome on the performance? So we are currently working on this because, as Ajay said, we collected data on revenues, for example, but we are actually currently assessing if we have all compelling figures, because due to the potential trust issues, we are actually double checking with survey and interview data if we have consistent data on the revenues. I actually can say that a preliminary finding, we find that the theory-based group actually increased the revenues more over time than the action-based group and the control group, even if the control group is not random, so it's just a qualitative benchmark. So we have this initial evidence of better performance. We are trying now to nail down the mechanism and to see, if there is this direct channel through, this increase in the perceived abilities. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. Before concluding and giving the floor again to Audra and to the Q&A, I would like to thank a lot, again, the people supporting the project, not only the funders of the project, but I enjoyed working a lot on this project. I think also I can speak for Raji, Francesca, and Audra, because this was an effort, a joint effort, which was, across institutions, across countries. It was very enriching from a cultural and personal point of view. And it was not possible without the help of the local team at Sugeko and the Sokoine University of Agriculture, because they were those in charge of the logistics, the support in conducting a program that actually is very challenging, because we coordinated it through Zoom, because for COVID-related reason we could not get there. We are planning to get there, to go there now to have a follow-up, let's say, inspection and data collection. But during this period, it would have been possible without these people. And again, this is a challenging program and ambitious, not only for the scientific results, again, this is an experiment, but also for practical results, because I think we actually achieved something very, very good and big and trying, to help also these entrepreneurs in developing their projects. So again, thank you very much, and looking forward to the Q&A.
Great, thanks a lot, Andrea. So we have two very thought-provoking questions from Dixon in the Q&A currently. For the rest of you, feel free to add, but I'll start with his first one, which is, how does the push for enterprise development in low and middle income countries such as Tanzania compared to their developed counterparts, say the US or Italy? So I will pose this question to my fellow panelists.
Sure, I can take it, and then Francesca, Agi, Audra, if you want to chime in, feel free. So at least for what I can talk about the Italian landscape, of course. We actually run also other studies in Italy. I can tell you actually that, for example, Agi mentioned that one of the challenges, or let's say issues, that these entrepreneurs mention is lack of trust. So they tend to avoid disclosing some kind of the projects also with their peers, also in the classrooms, so on and so forth. And it's actually something very much in common also with the Italian landscape. So when we have startups and founders that discuss their projects in our programs, actually they tend to be very reluctant sometimes in sharing their ideas, because they feel that some other people could steal the idea. So that's something that is very much in common. And also, if you look at the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor data, you know that there is this comprehensive survey of entrepreneurship across the globe. Tanzania, unfortunately, is not covered. So we tried also to complement some evidence with our data. But you can see, for instance, that accessing to financial capital is deemed to be one of the biggest challenges also in the US, in Italy, where maybe the financial market, is a bit more developed, at least in terms of the absolute loans, and this kind of stuff. So it's a lot about perceptions, I think. And I can also tell you that in this Tanzanian project, compared also to other projects that we had in other parts of the world, for example, Italy. In Italy, we see many entrepreneurs that terminate their projects. They drop out. So they attend the training, and then they drop out their idea for whatever reason. They discover it's not a good idea. They become discouraged. They do something else. So there might be several reasons why. Potentially, most of them drop because they realize the idea is not valuable, because that's actually the goal of our training, to have this more precise assessment of the potential value of the idea. And actually, in Tanzania, we don't find basically anyone dropping out. I think this could also be driven by the fact that this sample is, made of a bit more advanced entrepreneurs. As Francesca was showing you already at the beginning, some entrepreneurs were already at the sales stage, even if the amount of sales was not very large. And also there might be different motivations to pursue an entrepreneurial project. Maybe more related to the need for an extra income, or just, trying to find an alternative, job, so on and so forth. And also, I would also like to say that the data collection process was actually, we followed them from remote, but I found people in Tanzania to be more enthusiastic about their ideas, and also willing to participate, despite, the understandable, potential issue, the trust issue. But we found, these entrepreneurs to be very cooperative, and was very good, very, very nice to work with them. So I don't know if you want to add something else, but.
Thanks, Andrea. So Andrea gives a very comprehensive answer there, but is there anything, Francesca or Haji, you want to add here?
I think Andrea said pretty much most of the differences that we observe, especially with respect to the termination ratio. That's also something that, if you look at other papers that used the scientific approach or related trainings in other countries, I think this is one of the findings of this paper, that this approach generally leads entrepreneurs to tend to terminate more. But in our sample, we didn't find this evidence, which is not surprising, considering that It might be more difficult for entrepreneurs in the developing country context to just abandon the idea that they're working on. But I would say this is one of the most striking differences that we observe.
Great. So then I'll move us into our second question here. Dixon again has given us an assertion that entrepreneurship might be used to cover up government inefficiencies. What is your take on this as we seek to understand the relationship between entrepreneurship and effective governance? And so as I was reflecting on this question, I was struck by thinking about how often inefficiencies in governance, developed or developing countries, often create opportunities for entrepreneurs to solve problems, to help get around some of these inefficiencies. So that's sort of one take on it. The other end of the spectrum, I was reminded of Haji's example of the strawberry farmer who tried to get into the export business, but was not successful due to heavy regulation. And so at which point does governance, in an attempt to be effective, is perhaps becomes overly burdensome or something like that. So any thoughts from you all on this point? The relationship between entrepreneurship and effective governance.
So with effective governance, you mean, let's say the government structure or the...
Yeah, I mean, you can interpret it however you want, or, more generally different types of institutions. I mean, I think what the point you brought up about financial markets, I think that
Sure.
kind of falls into this as well.
Sure. So, I mean, there exists a lot of literature and also policy evidence that, and also many countries, not only in developing countries, but also, for example, in Italy, in the US, that are trying to foster policies to support entrepreneurship. So it's true that, some voids, let's say institutional voids, can also be filled by entrepreneurial activities, but it's also true, that an effective governance, an effective system, and there is this whole stream of research about the entrepreneurial ecosystem that shows how, an ecosystem that is more developed, with some kind of institutions and developed networks, so on and so forth, is actually supportive of a specific type of entrepreneurship, high growth entrepreneurship. So the one actually that is deemed to be mostly responsible for GDP growth. So for the overall growth of a country's economy. So of course there is an intertwined relationship that there might be a causal effect, so a causal chain of better governance, better entrepreneurship, but it could also be the other way around. So, better entrepreneurship, more, let's say, enthusiastic entrepreneurship that actually foster the development of better governance. So.
Haji, I'll put you on the spot. Any thoughts you'd like to share?
Audra? So with regards to this question, maybe I can contribute a bit, trying to relate entrepreneurship and governance with maybe specific focus with what I've just discussed in my part. If you can look at the way the issue of trust, as I discussed here, you can see that most entrepreneurs are afraid of supplying their information about revenues and earnings because their businesses are not registered. So if you can look at that as far as governance is concerned, that means the system of identification of business and the entire governance of business operations is not well organized, so to speak, in Tanzania. So that itself can be an opportunity for entrepreneurs, which maybe is not good to say. It's not so impressive, but of course, some of them can take advantage of evading from tax and probably maximizing their earnings. But that has implications to the government. So the government may miss potentially a significant portion of the tax revenues that could come from this particular part of the unregistered businesses, and probably miss some potential funds that could be used probably to even strengthen the organization of the business operations and registrations. So this is advantage to entrepreneurs if you think of them maximizing revenues as they are not paying tax, but also it's a cost to the government in terms of missing funds that could be used for strengthening the system. But also you can think of this as also disadvantage to entrepreneurs because of course they may take the small advantage of evading from paying tax, but if you can think of it in terms of their growth, that poses a great challenge because it's difficult for a non-formalized business to grow to that significant level, like enough to be part of the to participate even in the public shares in the public stock markets, but also to access credits. Mostly formal or commercial financial institutions will not be ready to extend the credit facility to unregistered businesses. Also, this business are potential to missing some potential help and assistance and services from the governments because they are not well recognized in the government system. So that is also a challenge for entrepreneurs. So getting a profit from evading from pay tax is just an advantage, but for sustainability purpose, that is not considered as real good, but they can think of the cost that may constrain their growth. So maybe I can talk of this in that way.
That's excellent. I think that's a really interesting point, thinking about both the opportunities and challenges of entrepreneurs that operate in the informal sector versus in the formal sector. So Dixon, thanks for two very thought-provoking questions. Really appreciate those. I'll have us wait just a minute or two more if anybody else has another question. But otherwise, in the meantime, I'll just reiterate our thank you to everybody for attending today from all over the world, and just a reminder that this presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to the consortium website in a few days' time. So any last questions? Did I miss some in the chat? Oh, yes, I did miss the questions in the chat. Thank you. I had the Q&A box open, not the chat. Oh, great. Okay, so question from Eliasa. Apologies if I mispronounced that. How do you consider the definition of SME in Tanzania as a basis of selecting the target group? Does your target group really fall under an SME category? Another thought would be another question related to other external challenges, for example, a severe drought that's hitting Tanzania. To what extent could our training program assist with some of that? So let's start with those two questions.
Okay, I can take that if you want. So with question one, how do we consider definition of SMEs in Tanzania as a basis of selecting the target group? We did not really select, like we did not purposefully restrict our target group to SMEs. Indeed, what we did at the baseline was to include both startups, so companies that we considered as not yet developed companies that had been operating, let's say, for the last couple of years, as well as established companies that wanted to develop some project that had some elements of innovation to it. So we included both groups of companies in our target sample at the beginning. The only requirement that we used for selecting the target sample was that these companies needed to have an idea of an innovative project that they wanted to develop and that they wanted to work on during the program. So that could be a project for starting a new business entirely, or it could be a project for starting a new business in the context of an already established business. So I hope that answered that question. And
Jessica, can I just add one stuff on this?
Yeah, of course.
So despite, this, the target was mostly, these entrepreneurs, and indeed our data shows that at least at the baseline, the number of firms that have, salaried employees are less than a half. And if they have salaried employees, the average is around 2 or 3. So we are talking about small firms. So even if they are already existing, we're talking about firms that, on average, if you consider also the owner and founders, the average number of people in the business, it's about 2 or 3. So it's very small entities. Sorry, Francesca, go.
Yeah, no worries at all. So about the other question related to external challenges such as drought, yes, we did have some entrepreneurs that mentioned that, but I would say this falls a little bit beyond the scope of our program. And for the question about to what extent your program focused to trigger entrepreneurial traits, leave alone skills and knowledge acquisition, again, this was mostly a strategy program. So of course, our goal was also to foster entrepreneurial abilities in general, but it entrepreneurial traits fall beyond the scope of our program. Yeah, so this is what I would say in response to those questions. Although, yes, of course, our objective was eventually to foster the development of better entrepreneurial skills, but we didn't specifically talk about traits, or we didn't specifically talk about this in the program. We could say that we talked about behavior changes in terms of, we talked about what you should do or what we would advise you to do to develop a business idea, but it wasn't entrepreneurial behavior program strictly defined.
And quick question, I'll pose it to Andrea from Don. Were there any standard business measures used to assess informal businesses baseline post-training, for example, sales, cost of goods sold, gross margin, financing?
Yeah, so we asked for the total sales at each data point, and also the total cost. For the startups, we asked, of course, for the cost overall and the sales overall. For the businesses, we asked for the cost and sales related to the business idea. For example, the innovative product or service they were developing during the program. So these are the two measures we asked. Also because, as Agi was saying, not many, or let's say it's not common that actually the bookkeeping practices are there. So asking for all this detailed information might, just lead to some kind of noisy data rather than precise data.
Great. Florence asks a good question. Haji, you brought up how difficult it is to build trust. How did we do this in our setting? So Haji, maybe I'll let you take the first stab at answering this question, please. Yeah, so Florence asked, how did we go about building trust? You brought up how it was difficult to establish trust.
Okay, so in my view, as far as trust is concerned, building trust is a function of a lot of things. First of all, it has to do with the governance part, the institutional arrangements. So as we noted that people are, most of the businesses are not registered. So there is a lot of informal businesses. And with that, people will not be willing, of course, will not trust the potential, I should say, the trust issue should be there as far as the business is operating in the informal environment, because people will not be willing to disclose their information, afraid that they might fall into conflicts with the governments. Okay, so if the government and the responsible regulatory authorities could ensure that the business are operating in a formal environment, probably everything could be transparent, and most of the issues would be transparent, and probably the issue of trust could be somehow improved.
Let me just interject real quick. Maybe you could speak to, since you already covered kind of the issues related to trust, as it went about our research design, as we went about building trust with these entrepreneurs, right? Maybe you could speak to how our partnership with Sugeko as an established and trusted institution in Tanzania. Could you talk maybe a little bit about that, please?
Sorry, Eldan?
Oh, sorry, maybe we're having a little bit of connection issues. Since you're at Sugeko, I was asking you to tell our audience a little bit about how we specifically designed this training program to be a part of Sugeko, and Sugeko is a trusted and established institution in Morogoro. So I was asking you to speak a little bit more about that.
Of course, Sugeko is one of the trusted organization, as it has been offering a lot of the agri-food sector. Working with Sugeko itself was an advantage, because this itself could at least provide some sort of assurance to the entrepreneurs that their information that are being supplying the information could be a safe thing to do, because they were working with at least the organization that is somehow trusted. So this is one of the probably a strategy that has been used to ensure that the information that could be collected are right and are not potential to the risk that could be caused by trust issues. But also, as we have also organized the various monthly event series to help participants, apart from the training program, helping them addressing their other challenges that needs like immediate attentions. So we asked them to identify their needs and organize the events that were geared towards addressing those needs. So that also was also part of the strategy to establish trust and show that we are part of their problem solving in their business development. So I think that is one of the strategies that have been implemented to ensure that the trust was at some higher level that could ensure that the data collected were reliable and less prone to these trust challenges.
Thanks, Haji. And to your point, also, we really sought to build community amongst these entrepreneurs. And so I mentioned each class size was about 15 to 20 entrepreneurs. Each class had its own WhatsApp group. They were interacting with each other for the 3-month duration of the course. And so it really was a relationship that was built over time through repeated interactions. It wasn't just a kind of a one-off, one afternoon type of relationship. All right, these have all been great questions. Did I miss any? Anybody else have anything to add? Otherwise, I think we can wrap it up. Thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate your thoughtful questions. Thanks for hearing us speak today, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your days.
Thanks very much, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.